Hello and welcome to episode 166 of the ANF podcast with me, Scott Casson-Rennie, and himself.
In a manly voice, Al Coates.
Manly voice. There's a first.
I know. Well, how the hell are you before we get into the man stuff? How the hell are you doing?
The man stuff? Ooh. Yeah, not bad.
Say it like Larry Grayson.
Oh, that's I. Oh, promises.
And that's how not to start a podcast.
Yeah, no, that is how to start a podcast, I feel.
Yeah, right.
I'm very good, actually. Yeah, I'm looking forward to my holiday next week.
Said.
Yes, I know. Well, you had the chance to go as well.
I did not. Scott, dear listener, Scott has been flancing himself around the internet on other people's podcasts. What podcast tartage have you got yourself up to now? Where have you been? What have you been talking about?
This came through Facebook and you were invited and I don't know what happened, why you didn't come. But anyway, I was kind of glad you didn't because you just talk all over me when we do interviews. So it's easier. But it was the Tech for Good Live podcast, right? Which now this does sound strange. I have to admit, dear listeners, because I turn up to the podcast, I do my bit, and then I go away, and then Al does everything to do with the technical side of it because I'm just useless. And to be honest, you're lucky I can log into it. Yeah, well, no, I wouldn't say that. It's just if I got too deep into it, the control freak nature that I have, I would want to control it. So therefore, I do all the pictures and stuff, and you do all the back.
I pull the levers and you do the painting.
Exactly. I do the paint, yeah. But
crayons and spanners.
It was really interesting approach. So it's somebody who is an adopted parent who does a podcast called Tech Good Live. Can't remember. Tech for Good Live.
Right.
Podcast. She does a podcast. She does it with some colleagues. They're all in the tech sector, and so basically it's a two-parter. It's over 2 weeks. So the first week will be an interview.
2 weeks.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. So the first one. Listen, you get invited to the parties. You've got the MBE. I get invited on podcasts. Come on.
That's fair. That's
right.
Fair.
Because I'm nicer. And and basically the first part was about AI technology, which was I read the thing that they sent beforehand. I was like, there's not a hope. There is not a hope of me having any opinion on this. But actually, when we got into
you read it.
I actually did. If you send it from an unknown email address, I tend to read those ones. But if it comes from you, I'm just like, oh, it's just elderly.
Fair enough.
No, I'm joking. But yeah. But when I read it, I was thinking AI. What? Because I'm struggling to get the AI thing off my Snapchat because you know how I use Snapchat to communicate with the boys. That's the only reason I use Snapchat. And it came up with my AI once, and I was like, how do you get rid of that? And apparently, you can't get rid of it. And it scares me, absolutely scares the living daylights out of me, the AI technology thing does. But anyway, when we got into it, the first part of the podcast, which is out next week, I think, is a discussion, the discussion about the AI technology and for good and for bad. So that's why they call it Tech for Good Live podcast. So they every week they do something that's good in terms of tech, and then something that's bad in terms of tech. So the good thing was about child labour. They've developed an AI in, I think it's Liverpool, an AI that will basically detect child labour and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff, right? Please don't ask me how it works because I haven't got a clue. So we discussed that. And I had a few comments to make on that. And then the bad bit was an AI app for religion, which is bad because it's not filtered. So therefore, somebody could ask a question, and I'll put it simply: can I? Well, let's just say, can I take somebody's life? Right. Let's just put it that way. Because I don't want to use the words that potentially get risky. And these AIs, depend on the religion, will come back to you and say yes, but as long as it's do. So there's no filter on them to make sure that actually they're within the law and all that sort of stuff. So it's really like
morals and ethics and values all in the mix.
Absolutely. So that was obviously a big worry. And like I was saying, we've got enough to worry about for our kids at the minute,
But that's an interesting point, because someone got in touch with me, Secret Squirrel, via message, infamous Secret Squirrel. And he said, this is a conversation people are having about social work and use of AI in terms of assessments, actually writing assessments, because there's a skill to writing assessment that's beyond just collate. In some ways, you could collate the data, then the AI could potentially give you the analysis of that in terms of I'm not sure how it would work in terms of a PAR, but there's
I'm just like, and I said it yesterday, and I don't want to give too much away, obviously, because people should listen to it, because it's actually a really good podcast. When you get into the guts of it, you might think it's just for techie people. It's not for techie people, and they were really, really lovely, and they were really friendly, and they didn't take the mickey out of me. They didn't talk over me. They let me speak, etc., etc.
Sounds hellish. An awful podcast.
But I did mention the fact that if there's technology available for child labour, then potentially the technology could be there for children who are being mistreated.
And possible thoughts.
But I'm still not sure I would trust it. And anyway, so the second part of the podcast, which will be out the week later, is about technology in the adoption sector.
So that's the bad bit, isn't it? Like the podcast.
No.
That was all contained in that. Adoption fostering podcast.
No. So that was just really an opportunity to have a chat about how and bearing in mind, this is from my knowledge. It's not like there's probably loads of more stuff that I wasn't aware of and all that sort of stuff before anybody hunts me down and beats me. But yeah, just talking about how things have changed in the adoption sector using technology. So things like link maker, contact, etc.
Matching. AI could do matching, couldn't it?
Well,
Oh, shut your mouth. That would be because in terms of there's an element of that being a manual process. And then that interplay of that comes all the biases, the human biases, the human, all that kind of stuff in stereotypes, all of that. But if you just put into like, hey, find a match for this couple or find a match for this child. Yeah. AI could do that.
Well, I mean, Bex, who's the host who invited me on.
First name terms now.
Oh yeah, and she's a massive fan of our podcast. She was fangirling to the point where Greg, who's our co-host, was more or less telling her off to stop fangirling.
Fair enough.
But I mean, she's a techie, and she said herself that she would love to be able to build something in the sector for contact that would help contact and support contact. And like I said to her, there is stuff being developed at the minute and being looked into, but yeah, so who knows? But yeah, was able to plug our podcast and the work that we're doing at FASD Ireland in the hope that there was maybe a what they called then people who like to support causes who've maybe got a bit of cash in their back pocket,
like a benevolent kind of individual.
What are they called? Well, they're called something. Anyway, it'll come to me.
I'm sure it will at the worst possible moment. I might listen to that. I probably should listen to that, shouldn't I? But
you should, because you'll find it really interesting from the techie side. I guarantee you. So even if you just listen to the first one.
You say I was invited, but I didn't actually get an invite. It was like, it's happening. Al's not coming.
Yeah, because I thought, you know what? You get enough things. You get enough invites.
Fair enough. Apparently, you've got an invite to Adoption UK now. So are you going to the Barometer?
I am. I've booked my flights. Yes, I've booked my flights. I'm going to the launch of the Barometer next Wednesday, I think it is.
Yeah.
Westminster. So that'll be my... there's lots of firsts in there. First time I've been back with the Adoption UK crowd since I left. First time at Westminster.
It's going to be like a Mexican standoff over the buffet.
Oh, is there a buffet?
No one said anything about a buffet.
And even though I was at Adoption UK when the Barometer was, first started and stuff, I never got to go to a launch. So yeah, there's lots of firsts in there. But yes, we were both invited. Well, sorry, you were invited, and then I kicked off.
You're my spare.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. I'm going, and then we've been invited to something else as well today. But I don't know if you've seen that email, but yeah, we've been invited to something else as well. Some presentation of research. Yeah, but I'll have to have a look at that. But yeah,
that's when I know what you do. You troll the emails, and then if you like them, you discreetly move them into another folder. You think, oh, I'll have a bit of that one. You slippery fish, you. Anyway, well, enough of your excitement. Shall we crack on with this podcast about men things?
Yeah, let's. Yes.
Or maybe I'll tell you one thing that happened to me this week is I got social work done, which was really odd because I was in a meeting.
I'm really interested to hear this. What's the story?
Well, so I have to be really careful because it's all got incredibly political in terms of the machinations of national organisations. So it's all gone a bit wrong and it's all gone a bit wonky and it's all kind of okay in the end, right? But halfway through, I was social worked by a social worker. They were kind of like trying to make everything okay, and they literally social worked me. And I came away and I had this like visceral reaction to like, and I thought it was, do you know, have you ever been social worked where there's a sense of it's just slightly insincere? You get this sniff where you think they're saying all the right things,
right? But
I'm not sure I believe you. So it might be me it might be my issue, maybe not their issue. I don't know. But I suppose I thought, well, after having had social workers for like 20 plus years, I don't know whether you get a really keen nose for when this is good social work or bad social work. Yeah.
I can smell
this is going to get me into so much trouble.
I can smell it.
It's just a whiff.
I said it, not you.
I know, but anyway, it's probably going to get me cast out of the profession onto the dung heap of anyway. So that I just got a social work, and it was a really odd sensation. I thought, I've forgotten what that feels like. So that was really odd, and it made me kind of mindful of my own practice and trying to be better at being a social work.
There you go. There's the thing, isn't it? That's the key part of that. So never social work somebody the way that you don't like to be social worked, because even though you are a social worker, you're a parent.
How did that happen?
And how did that happen? Like Daisy must have been having a bad day the day they qualified you. But anyway,
bottom of the barrel.
Yeah,
got to get the quotas up.
Oh, there's only one left. Oh no! Oh, it's him.
Oh well, put him somewhere safe.
Oh my days! Oh,
We're laughing. But
no, you're a very good social worker.
I'm sure. Well, you don't know that, do you?
Well, I do actually, because I've spoken to people who know it. Yes, I do.
No, you don't know that. I've never social worked you.
No, you've never, and you never will. Because if you did, I would just punch you and run away.
Well, I do try and social work you because I always, when I want something from you, I go, hiya. How was your weekend?
Yeah. As you've got the door, as you've got your foot in halfway in my door to do your visit.
Yeah, it's just me.
Yeah,
anyway, we're so far off the beaten track.
Listen, It can't be any worse than being that parenting style thing where they go, I wonder if when somebody does that and it's your husband, you kind of, do you know what I mean? You're like,
that kind of curiosity pays, isn't it?
Yeah.
Careful acceptance. Yeah, I can see you're quite angry now. Right now, I wonder why that might be. Go on, boil your head.
Exactly. Why don't you just put the petrol canister away for now, rather than pouring petrol on the fire? Anyway, yes, fabulous.
I remember you mentioned it. This month we've kind of done a lot of things around child-to-parent violence, challenging behaviour, and we've looked at it from different perspectives. We looked at adoption disruption. We had Vicky Baker on, who looking at children's perspectives. We had Fiona Wells on, looking at kind of adoption crisis. We had Nikki Rutter on, looking at it from mum's perspective. And today, I think we really need to kind of unpick this whole thing about men. And it was really brought into sharp focus where I was invited to kind of run a time-limited support group for a group of men. And I thought, cool. You know me, I'm a tart. I'll say yes to anything. And then I go away and go, really? Should I do that?
Yeah.
And I went away and I tried to do some research and just found absolutely zero in terms of men's experiences of children's behaviour, like something focused, like Nikki Rutter's work about mums. There's a few things around female perspectives and mums' perspectives. Nothing around men. So I said to you, Scott, I said, let's do something about men in Europe for that. So are you up for it?
I am, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I've decided because I thought about it a bit, and I'm going to be quite honest about it.
Oh,
because I don't think I've
normal.
ever kind of. Well, no, I think it's I think it's the discussing some of the finer details. It sometimes worries me that I would do that because I don't want the suspense.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to. You don't want to.
I don't want to. But I will say
children's
this. I mean, the main thing was with violence with us has been with Jacob, and Jacob and I have talked about it a lot, and he's now nearly 17, and we have talked about it a hell of a lot, and kind of we've reflected on it and discussed why, and all those sorts of things, and it doesn't happen anymore, thankfully and gratefully. Sometimes there's a bit of verbal stuff, but that's still within that category, but it's still there. But
yeah.
it's not the physical stuff anymore. And and he's quite happy for me to share it because actually he feels that if it's helping somebody else, then that's a good thing. So
that's fantastic.
I'll do that within reason because I don't want to.
Yeah. And I want to thank everyone who's contributed because we've had a lot of people who contacted us and private messages about experience. Really, and so there was a slightly strange phenomenon that started happening that when women started to tag their husbands in Facebook and as if just when you put someone's name in so that they have to read the thing. So there was a wife who did that in terms of putting a husband's name in, thinking you need to talk about this, which I think is probably demonstrates a point in of itself. And there was another comment from someone in terms of, because I said, same-sex couples, thinking in my head, men. Because I said, we're talking about men. I said same-sex couples. And someone in a same-sex female couple said, well, yeah, and that's something for us. And I thought, I literally have no place to speak about that because I'm not a woman and I'm not in a same-sex couple. No. So that is something to unpick at another time. So we're not ignoring that phenomenon, but I just thought I cannot speak with any sort of inside knowledge. I don't know some people.
I can talk about it as two men, but I can't talk about it as two females, obviously.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this, and I've sort of got myself in a bit of a knot with it, really, in terms of same-sex couple men's experience. And so I was really interested to know if some of the things that I highlighted, because I wrote a list, and I think you've got the list, haven't you?
Yeah, I did read it. Well, I didn't read it really. I just glanced at it.
You acknowledged it existed.
It's from Al.
Another list of stupid things. A job list that I sent you through to be done by 10 a.m. this morning. So firstly, do you think that there's a phenomena of living in a home where there's a violent, aggressive child, and we're not unpicking why children are like that and what all of the vulnerabilities that can lead to that? But would you think that that's a different experience as a male as opposed to a woman? Sorry, as opposed to a female?
So
dad versus mum.
I think it probably is. And I think, that I'm not taking away from any experience. Absolutely not. But I think that we've got our own kind of perspective to play on it as well. And I think that for men, I was going to be politically correct there with the gender. We're talking about men, so let's talk about men. So I think when it comes to men, I think that when this sort of stuff comes along, it's actually, I don't want to use the word embarrassing, but it's something that actually but personally, I became quite ashamed of the fact that I couldn't manage my child's behaviour so that it didn't happen. And I ignored it. I put my head in the sand. We just lived with it. Absolutely lived with it until and I lived with it until you started talking about it. And that was at the point where I went, oh, okay, so other people are experiencing this. It's not just me. And I think that potentially is one of the issues for men is that kind of, that inability to be able to stop it for their family, for their wives or partners or whatever.
Right.
Because actually, especially if they're experiencing most of it and they're the ones that have got the bruises and, the bites and the scratches and what have you. And as a man, not being able to manage that or manage a child's behavior so that it stops and they're protecting their partner or wife or, spouse, whatever you want to call them. I think that's probably, maybe, just my opinion, probably the biggest issue for men. would be that.
That's interesting, because I was chatting to this group that I'm doing support in, and I said to them, look, I'm going to talk about some of the stuff we've talked about and some of the stuff they've highlighted, but obviously non-identifying. But that is interesting, because I think that idea that some men were sort of saying, look, I know that we live in a terribly modern world and, equality and all of that, but actually, whether there's an element of social learning or whether it's a stereotype or not, but still, as a man, I feel protective. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's my role, to protect people I love. And that's not to just diminish that maybe women feel that too, but I think, is it more pronounced? Do you think it's more pronounced for men?
Yeah, I think so. I think if I think about our experience as two men, well, two men trying to protect each other. Yeah, and it's. I'm me. I'm not an alpha male at all. But when it comes to, the violence, the CPV stuff, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, because I didn't want anybody getting hurt, but. And it's not that Tris is more dominant than me or anything like that, but we both assigned our roles. And you know yourself, I'm not sure, because I'm the one that cooks dinner when Al says, oh, can we meet at 6? And I'm like, no, we can't meet at 6. I have to be cooking dinner at 6, and I've just got in from work, and I've got hoovering to do, and laundry to do, and blah, blah. Well, it's true though, isn't it?
It's true. Yeah, you are that sort of pastoral nurturing.
Exactly. Whereas Tris is more beat them with a stick. No, he doesn't. I'm joking. But he's kind of, I don't know how to describe him actually.
Well, I guess he's. That's what I was really intrigued about, kind of in a same-sex couple. If there is that division of roles, because that you maybe describe that as those heteronormative kind of nurturer, provider.
And I'm not saying that everybody's like that. I'm not saying everybody's relationship. I'm sure there's people who do the joint thing and all that sort of stuff. But I think that our situation is that there is more of a kind of nurturing role that I do, and then there's more of a whatever the word is. No, not paternal. I don't know what the word is anyway. I've never thought about it too much to be able to describe it, but certainly, so when Jacob was younger, and if we were experiencing a meltdown or whatever, it would be, you go and you do, and blah 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 blah, because Tris felt the need to protect me and get me out of the way so that I didn't get hurt. But in actual fact, that really didn't work, because at the very beginning, when we first started to experience it, none of us knew what to do.
Well, yeah.
We didn't know about safe hand. What is it called? Safe handling? Is it called safe handling? No. No, that's manual handling. Sure. I'm thinking of.
I was going to say, manual handling. Yeah.
Lifting him and throwing him in the back of a car. No, but like if they're starting to, how to
how to physically. Maintain safety for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. All that sort of stuff. We didn't have a clue. We didn't know that us telling them to stop would actually just be adding petrol to the flame. We didn't know any of that. We genuinely didn't know any of that, and it's taken us a long. I think that it stopped because we actually started to manage it correctly, as well as him growing up, as well as our parenting style definitely changed. All that sort of stuff. But I think that. You're right. The protective nature is there. It's there for both of us in that situation. Yeah. But I just did as I was told and got out of the way and thought, well,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of reflected, because we're kind of a few years, like you were a few years beyond it all in sort of a physical sense. Still challenging behaviour, but kind of manifests differently. And nowhere near as much. But I kind of really remember feeling really strongly the need to step in. When sometimes that isn't what's needed and not what Paula wanted. Yeah. But me thinking, I'm not going to let anyone, like if we were walking down the street and someone started on Paula. Yeah. And then my job is to protect her. Physically, I'm bigger. Physically, I'm capable and able. Well, I'm not. I guess I'm making it sound like I'm a cage fighter. Honestly,
you're 5'3", mate.
5'3", and 7 stone in ringing wet.
And the thing is, I mean, I know you both reasonably well now, and I get why you would be like that, because obviously that's the experience. Yeah. Actually, even I think Paula would actually be. She would knock them sideways if someone did that in the street anyway. So but I think is it this I don't know. Is it
like
this
social
male
thing?
brain
Yeah.
thing that's going on
Oh,
where,
yeah.
you know, we were brought up in a certain way because our generation was brought up in a certain way. When we were please and thank you, respect your elders, manners, all this kind of thing, protect people, opening a door. Apparently, you're not allowed to open a door anymore. You know, if
Don't
you
worry,
open the
I'll
door
open
for
a door
somebody,
for
that's
you. Don't
well,
worry,
of course you would. I know you would, because you know that if you didn't, then I would have something to say about it. But my point is, like the world has changed.
Chivalry, yeah.
Yeah, and so is it that, or you know, I don't know what the next generation of parents or the younger generation of parents might be kind of experiencing with that.
Yeah, it's hard because I do wonder whether there is that kind of hard wiring in men to, you know, we're physically stronger just by default. You know, we just can't help it. Paul, when the children got to a certain age, Paul, then the match becomes uneven. But I still am the biggest person in the house, so I can physically stop behaviour, and that just I'm having to contain. And I just think that all of that social learning and I remember, and this is me being absolutely brutal on this. It was 3:00 in the morning, and it was all kicking off again. And it happened every night for months and months and months. And that's not an exaggeration. It was months and months. And I remember being scratched and hurt and bitten and, you know, by a small child. And I remember thinking I could stop this. And I remember getting an absolute shock. It was 3 a.m. You know, so it was the end of a really long process. And I remember thinking, I'm the stronger person here. I can stop this. And I remember thinking, that's a really dark place, and it was a really dark time. Is when I kind of had to give up work and all of that. The total pivot moment in all of our lives. But just thinking that for men, I think that the physical nature of how it, you know, a woman defending herself against a child who's being aggressive is one thing, but me as an adult male defending myself against a child, be that holding a child or holding a hand or just putting an arm out. It's open to misinterpretation as well. So a lot of men speaking to kind of going, look, I can't even go anywhere near this because I feel so vulnerable because I'm the big hairy one in the room, if you know what I mean. I am the man. And so I think that stereotype stuff is something that, well, it's not a stereotype. I think it's.
Well, no, it's I don't know what it is. What is it?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know what it's called.
Well, I guess
we're doing really well tonight with the old descriptions and the.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's. I think it's. I mean, is it social learning, like you said? Is it that's what we've been programmed to be, or is there something kind of deep down at a genetic, like psychological level, and the makeup as being a man that we are protectors, providers, protectors, and that's not universally true.
No.
But that only maybe manifests in moments of stress that most people don't get themselves into.
Yeah.
You know, like meek and mild, but then you see your wife getting slapped.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that changes.
Or your husband getting slapped. You know, in your case.
Yeah.
Oof. There you go. So that was our first point. I was at another event recently, and there was a couple of men talking about their mental health about this, and it was really unusual because I was at an event and there was men there. So that's another thing.
That is unusual. Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that.
And it was like so unusual. Everyone stopped and went, "There's men in the room. What are you doing here?" And bless them. And they were really honest about their mental health and about the impact of living with a child who was violent aggressive. And I think one was a same-sex couple and one wasn't. And I just wondered about mental health and about again, and that's something I know you've got an abiding kind of interest in.
Yeah.
What are your reflections on your mental health in that time? Because it's like you're laughing.
We should have brought a therapist in.
We should have got a grown up in the room, shouldn't we?
Well, I think a lot of this is probably some stuff that I've never said out loud before, but I do. I mean, everything to do with parenting has an impact on everything, but mental health mainly because school. Let's use school as an example.
Yeah,
this is an example of how schools have affected my mental health over the years of dealing and advocating for my children. If the phone rings, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who relate to this, if the phone rings and I see it at school, I will not answer it. I refuse to answer it. I can't answer any more shit from school. I genuinely can't do it. It sends me into a panic. it makes my stomach churn, drop, whatever you want to say, my heart race. I find myself then panicking because obviously I've not taken the call. So, let's hope that he's not in an ambulance on the way to, the hospital or something like that. But that's as a result of all of those calls, all of the years saying, oh, he's done this, he's done that, he's done the next, because it affects you. And to the point, I think it's actually made me less likely to answer a phone call, generally. Less likely to want to speak to somebody on the phone. So, and using that as a kind of a basis for the triggers that I experience, I absolutely agree that this does have an impact on your mental health. And whether you're aware of it or not, I think it does, because I think that every time there's now a raised voice in the house, I go, oh, is this it? Is this it again? Are we going to experience this again? We were talking there, it's not just the physical stuff, it's the challenging behavior as well. And it's not been the easiest 4 days, I will be honest, at home. And last night was quite tough. And it wasn't with Jacob, which is hard. But it was tough because I was taken back to a couple of years ago when it was every day, and it's not every day now. And I am very grateful for that. But it was in my head and it clicked. So therefore, I didn't sleep well last night, worrying, is this where we're going again? Because I think that we all have to have a protective kind of mechanism that we can deal with this stuff. And I think that, I do often reflect and wonder, the parenting side of this, and I look at some of our friends who've got, children who are biological and all that sort of stuff. And, oh, what a fabulous time they're having this stuff. But are they? Are they having a fabulous time? They've gone off on holiday. Oh, whoopie-doo, you've gone on holiday with your adult children. Is one of them, taking advantage of the free alcohol and making a complete fool of himself to the point where, you're the one that ends up going back to your room because you can't deal with it? So it does. It absolutely, I think it does. Absolutely have but again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I've never addressed it because actually I chat to you about stuff. Tris and I talk. I talk. I do talk. And I don't feel that it's affected me that bad that I need to, go and have a therapy or something like that. However, I probably should, and I probably could do it, because actually it might help me to deal with, those kind of trigger points for me. So I could just kind of, breathe through it, or whatever the thing is. But my experience of therapy, isn't positive. So therefore, I won't be going to that point, because actually that's a lot of work. I've got enough to do without having to stop every time somebody raises their voice and go, okay, breathe through it, you'll be fine. That kind of thing. So I can deal with it. But, if it got to the point where I couldn't deal with it, obviously I would be very aware of that, because, like you say, I'm very aware of mental health and how it affects people. So,
that's really interesting, I think, and I'd not thought of it in those terms, because I think that, I can presume that in terms of, well, what's really interesting is I can look at other people and go, I can see why you would feel like that. I could see why you would do that. But then I kind of, if I pause for a moment and think, I can remember living with a knot in my stomach for months and hyper vigilant, like, or hearing two children talk in the next room and it starts to raise and you're in there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Or you hear a door slam, and the tiniest things mean that you're back into it. And I do wonder whether, I'm always a bit nervous around overusing the word trauma, because I think that it is a bit of a buzzword. But I do think that there's real validity in thinking about the experience of people who are living with adversity, and especially in this context, men, in that that then has to buck the trend of us being, we're big, strong. Am I talking too much from my own perspective? But I think we want to portray ourselves as strong. We want to portray ourselves as coping. And that's why men don't go for help, isn't it? All the time, because actually I look back now and I was a bag of nerves.
Yeah.
sick to my stomach with it. And
I think you're right, though. You're talking about it from your own experience, which is why that's why you're. My days, Al actually shared some personal stuff on the NF podcast.
I said at the beginning, I looked for research and there just isn't any.
Yeah.
And so I can only, and my only experience of kind of validating that, put my teeth in, is talking to the groups of men and going, on other men and going, I feel this. And I'm going, oh, absolutely. And maybe I've got the reflective skills to unpick that to the nth degree. Just that's the nature of who I am. But I can kind of break it down to lots of things, and lots of people going, that's me. I get that. Totally get that.
Yeah.
But I think back, I look now and I think, what a really dark place we were in, and what a dark place I was in. And I probably never shared this, but I had a meeting where I talked to a social worker about what's going on, and I literally disassociated in the meeting, and in the sense that I started to faint, and I've never ever in my life experienced anything like that. So me recounting like actually what is going on in my house today and has been going on in the last few weeks, I literally started to go dizzy, just sat down and started to go dizzy. And I said, I think I'm going to faint. And then I look back now because it's funny, because it's really shocking social work. And they all went, all right, okay. Right, well, we'll keep going. And I was thinking, and I looked back now, I thought, if anyone said that in a meeting, I'd hope I'd go, let's have a little moment. Let's have a glass of water, get some fresh air. Yeah. And
maybe put your leg between your leg between your heads.
Leg between your heads.
Between your legs, even.
Yeah, I know. That's why it's a podcast, because so no one ever has to look at me.
Exactly.
So I think mental health is a massive one, isn't it? I think
huge,
that's
absolutely huge. And I think that when you're going through it, you don't realize. I mean, you know what? I could be wrong, and if you know. I know we've got a few men that listen, but I would be really keen to hear from other men about about this whole thing, to be honest with you. But for me, when you're going through it, I don't think you realise just the impact it's having on you. And that could be said for everything, you know. The reasons behind the violence, the physical violence, like you said, let's not go into that. But once you work out the reasons, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you can actually then kind of minimize the violence or even for it to stop, because actually you just find a way to be able to do. Well, that's my experience. Like I say,
you excuse the violence, or you go, yes, it's just because.
Sometimes, but that's not resolving.
No.
That's just. That's just going, let's have the crap beaten out of us because it's this or it's that.
They're just hyper vigilant. They're just hyper aroused.
The biggest turning point for me was style of parenting, because I had to change my parenting style. Well, we had to change our parenting style, and that is not something that I say out loud lightly, because I know it was always this. Everybody used to say battles and wars. Yeah. So and I'm sure Tris won't mind me saying, he was always one for the battles and I was always one for the wars, because he would like challenge everything. And very recently he started to share with me actually that he feels like he was a shit parent up till maybe 4 or 5 years ago, because we had our issues with the older two, but really the challenging stuff came with Jacob, and there's a reason for that. But our parenting style was very different with the two of them. And we bumped along thinking that yes, it's challenging, and yes, it's this and that.
Doing okay generally,
but we were all right. I mean, it was tough, but we were all right. And then, boom, and it wasn't until we actually got to understand that actually our parenting style wasn't helping, and it wasn't that we were crappy parents. I'm not saying that. It was just that we dealt with stuff differently with the other two, and that didn't suit for him. So therefore, it was kind of a clash of where he was at, all that sort of stuff. And I a couple of weeks ago, I went to Jeff Noble's thing in Air.
Yes, I do recall that. Another podcast you got yourself onto. Too soon.
I was a guest of his at his conference in there.
You're like talent
Anyway.
for hire, aren't you? Have you got a publicist?
Yeah, people like me. What can I say? They invite me to things. I've forgotten where I was going with that now. Where was I before I said about
Parenting styles, Jeff Noble. You hadn't realized.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So, and you know, there was something he said about other parents looking in on your parenting and going, well, I wouldn't let my child away with that. And he said, it's all about accommodating. It's about accommodating your child and making sure that they're safe, they're secure, they're fed their water, etc., etc. But actually that you're okay as well. So yes, there might be a number of things that you would do differently. Thank you, Mrs. Jones. But basically, pee off and mind your own business, because actually you don't live in our house where all this stuff is going on. So therefore, I'm accommodating the symptoms of my child to stop what inevitably might happen. And I thought that actually, to me, was a really good way of kind of explaining it. We're accommodating their symptoms, which is another word for behaviour, but I prefer the word symptom.
So in thinking it in terms of men, then, do you think that men maybe don't seek help the way women seek help?
Abso-friggin-lutely.
It's like a no-brainer.
And you know, well, I hope you don't mind. You can edit this bit out if you like. But I see that the difference between you and Paula, because I get messages from Paula, I get messages from you, and Paula's like, this has happened, that's happened, the next thing's happened. And then I message you just to make sure you're all right. And I go, you're all right. And you go, yep. Whereas she's giving you like 50 messages. 50 messages. And then I get, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm in London, or, you know, whatever. So yes, women do deal with it differently. Absolutely different. And I think that, but I don't think I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because we're all different anyway, aren't we? You know,
yeah.
You know, Paula's a social butterfly, you're a total introvert, you know, so there's lots of differences there anyway. How have you lasted this long, actually? Just thinking about it.
Well, no, I don't know. It's the 27 years.
No, the same. You know, I'm quite sociable and he's less sociable, kind of thing. You know, so listen, opposites attract and all that sort of shit. Yeah. And, you know, but
do you think,
I do think there is a thing in that, because I think that actually, like females probably more inclined to say, this has happened, any advice, or I've done this, or do you know what I mean? Whereas I think males, I think males, I think there's a bit of pride, but there's also an element, and I don't use this word lightly either, but I think there's an element of time for reflection on what's happened before we go, okay, I've dealt with that. It's resolved itself, or it's not resolved. Do you know what I mean? I think maybe it's
going to move on. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying that is the way for everybody, but you know.
But that is interesting, because again, talking to this group of men and just my own experiences, that, I mean, you've probably had it where you do an event, talk about challenging behavior or challenges, and then there'll be it's probably predominantly women there. And at the end, there'll be a group of women who want to talk to me about their husband. I wish my husband had been here to hear what he said. And I don't, pride's maybe the wrong word. Yeah, it does happen an awful lot.
And it's not just, I'll be honest, it's not just, I don't know. It's not just with adoption and fostering either. I mean, through work now, that's what we're starting to get as well. Because there's, you know, with FASD, obviously, mother feels guilty, shamed, etc., etc. And I'm talking about biological mothers here, you know, who are still parenting for their children because there is no awareness, you know, all that sort of stuff. And certainly, that is the same message. I wish my husband was here, but he just thinks that there've been little shits, kind of thing, you know.
It's really odd, because I reflect. I do kind of unpick this a bit, because I think that, looking at how me and Paula work, so maybe how universally true this is, I don't know, but often Paula will get a lot of sense of relief out of talking it out. This thing happened tonight. Yeah, I said this, they said that, they did this, I did that. I don't get any relief from that whatsoever. I get relief from totally putting it to bed. And for me to then talk about it more, actually, it's just perpetuating how uncomfortable I felt about the whole thing. And And that doesn't mean I'm not reflective, because I often will go over about, well, I should have, and I look back now on some of the worst events. I look back now and, like you said, I think, oh, I could have handled that differently. If I'd have stepped aside or said this or pulled away or just let them go, whatever the thing was, then we would not have got into kind of it. It would have not inflamed to the point it did. But that is just easy to say, isn't it? That's
absolutely in the moment. It's a totally different situation, especially when it's like, I don't know about you, but some of the times it's just like a big curveball. Everything's been fine all day. And then boom, all of a sudden, and you're just, whoa, okay, and you just think, where did that come from? Like I wasn't expecting it, all that sort of stuff. And it's the same for that. And it's interesting because I was actually with you a lot over some of that, and I do remember the phone calls, some of the phone calls from Paula, and you were like, "Yeah, can't do anything right now. No, can't do anything right now." And it was like literally a 5-minute phone call where you wouldn't say a word, and Paula would just offload to you because something had happened with something. And it was, from my perspective, I'm like you, because if I'm away for work, as an example, when I used to be away for work, and if it would kick off, I would get chapter and verse, whether it was on the phone or when I got home or whatever. And I'd be like, well, did you deal with it? Why? Like, I wasn't there, so I can't do it. I can't
believe you said this to him.
I did.
I would have been killed.
Yeah, quite often.
Well,
but like I was saying, I'm away for work. I'm away for work. Do you know what I mean?
Well, like I think a lot. I mean, I guess we're due into gender stereotypes that men are maybe at work more and women not. That's not universally true, but I think the experience of talking someone down off the edge of a cliff can be, if not as difficult, can be more difficult. And that I might get shot down in flames for that. But I know that when the roles have been reversed very infrequently, that it's really hard, Paula. That when I'm kind of going, I just need you to tell them not to do what they, that conversation. Hiya, we're in here and doing it. You're like your Dan Hughes. I
wonder
voice. Maybe you could chat to them. But again, I think. Do you think again, we're leaning into some stereotypes? So if anyone has been offended by the gender stereotyping that we've done tonight, they can phone Tris, Cass, and Rennie on our complaints officer.
But that's the thing. I mean, I'm not like that. I just get on with it when I'm with them, and I don't know if that's just kind of saying, well, being blind to it or just ignoring it because I don't want it to kick off or whatever. Because, there's been, well, yourself, Tris goes away every so often to do his Thailand detox. And sometimes, I mean, blimey, when I think back to when we lived in the UK and he used to do that and Jake was quite young, stuff would happen. Fraser got arrested, ended up at the A&E, all that sort of stuff. All this stuff happened. And I was like, okay, well, that's happened. I'll tell him when he comes home, I'll share it. And not because I didn't want him to know, but because I didn't want him worrying, really. I didn't want him worrying when he wasn't in the house.
So my thought is that maybe we are leaning at gender stereotypes, but do you think that sometimes men are fixers? And so this is one point that was brought to me, is that where I find it very stressful when Paula talks to me about stuff, because I want to go, well, you should do this. You should, maybe if you did that. And what I would do is this. And then she looks at me as like I'm an alien, and as if to say, like, I do not want your opinion.
And probably wants to say to you, how about you going F off?
Just do words, my love.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've been married 27 years, so I'm just really struggle when she offloads a problem into me. I need to fix that problem. I'm like, I have to fix it. And she has to tell me.
Just the same.
And it's oil and water, isn't it? It's like, she's like going, I don't want your opinion. I just want you to nod politely at appropriate moments and maybe give me a shoulder rub.
Yeah.
So that.
But I think you're right. I mean, certainly that would be the way that we would work as well. And like you say, it's gender stereotype maybe, but Tris would be a fixer. So if I had said to him when Brandon got arrested when he was in Thailand a couple of years ago. Not Brandon wasn't in Thailand. Tris was in Thailand. Brandon got arrested on a night out. If I told him that, his instinct would have been to get on the first flight and come home. But that wasn't going to resolve the issue. It wasn't going to solve anything.
Yeah.
He was due home in 4 days.
He'll survive.
Yeah, exactly. Brandon and I had a long chat about it. We worked out what had happened, what had gone wrong, etc., etc. He was aware of what he'd done. By God, you don't spend the night in a cell and not know what you've done unless you're completely stupid. Yeah. But I just didn't see the point. I didn't see the point in him worrying. And then, if it was medical, don't get me wrong, because actually, same child, suspected meningitis, and Tris flew home in the first flight, and that was different. That was a medical issue. I had, I couldn't not do that to either of them because he wanted his dad, and Tris would have, killed me if I hadn't done that. And to be fair, I needed him there. But
but it does. I think that does reflect that sense that men, again, gross stereotypes.
Yeah,
we keep saying that. It's getting boring.
I think we're saying it because we were trying to protect the complaints.
Yeah, department from being overwhelmed. But I do think that it's really that men just respond and react to that and what they need. Because I was thinking in terms of support as well. So, for example, if you said to me, if you say you lived 5 miles down the road from me, and you said, "Oh, Al, I've had a terrible week. Do you want to come out for a coffee and we'll chat about it?" No. That makes me run cold at the thought of us sitting over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or whatever. And I think that's maybe that idea that men have shoulder to shoulder relationships, women have face to face, and they'll do whatever socially, but they'll talk about this stuff. I don't want to do that with my friends. And like with you, the podcast is very much it's a side to side thing. Yeah. So often it's incidental that I never say, "Oh, well, come in early and we'll have a right chat."
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That was
very camp. We normally do that afterwards. Yeah, it was very camp. But we normally do that afterwards. But I think as well, and I don't think people realize this, when we were talking about stuff maybe for the first time with each other. Yeah. So, and that's I think that's how comfortable we feel just chatting to each other, to be fair. But then we forget it's been recorded and it'll go out on Saturday.
Put it out, yeah.
But I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that. I'll have a gripe and a moan sometimes. Of course do. Everybody does. Do they not? About things. I don't know. But I wouldn't want to sit there and spend 3 hours just going over it and over it and over it and, all that sort of stuff. One of the words that I saw earlier that you used was isolation. And I think it is massively isolating for men because I don't want to talk about it outside of my family unit, particularly. And I think part of that is, again, the kind of the inability to manage it. And I'm talking about when, now it's more kind of, would I say controlling behaviour? I don't know I don't know what words I'd use to describe it now, but certainly there's no physical violence anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't want to talk about that outside of my little crib, because if I did, am I going to get judged? Quite likely, because there's not many people that would understand it. I'm talking about it with you because I know that you've been there, and yours has been, well, I mean, it's all bad, whatever way you look at it. But
because it's not a competition.
Yours has been rough, and I mean, sometimes I want to slap you as well, but that's different kind of.
Too soon. I do wonder, because I think about our situation. I thought, I'm hosting a support group, and I think, would I come to this? And I go, I'm not sure I would. But I think that for me, one of the saving graces was that I found a cause. I found an outlet for this, that actually every time something bad happened, I knew that I could help someone, that I can, and I know that sometimes me just saying, "Oh yeah, it's really crap," and standing in front of a podium and saying that, but people in the room go, and that's enough. That's enough for me. And I think that but if I hadn't had that, if I hadn't been a social worker, I hadn't had this platform, how would I have coped? And I'm not sure. I think it would have been much worse than it was. Oh, I think have we unpicked all of the things on my list? I think we have, haven't we? I'd be interested to know what women think about this.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know about both sexes and what they think, because I wonder, like you say, we're not female, so we don't know how it is, and I think that you just talked about support there. Like, I wouldn't necessarily go to support groups because I don't think their experience would be the same as mine in terms of if I went to a male support group, unless it was a male support group that was, had maybe 50% gay men in it, because I don't think that I wouldn't be able to relate to the perspective of, the same
heterosexual couple. Yeah.
So I think that would be quite difficult. But yeah, I'd be very interested to hear from males as well as females on this, because I don't know, maybe this could help some males actually relate.
Well, there'll be
it'll all be DM. There will be no public comments. It'll all be direct messages, so that we don't put our names out publicly.
I was going as well. There'll be lots of women who'll be downloading it, going, "Listen to this on your way to work."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and do you know what? There's no shame. There's no shame in any of it. That's one thing I no longer feel is any shame. I don't feel shame anymore, because actually, you know what? It's circumstances. Yes, I got stuff wrong to begin with, but actually I learned how to manage it, how to deal with it. There's people who aren't as lucky to be able to get that, and I know that, and I know I'm very lucky. As in, I know I'm very lucky that the kind of the symptoms of or his experience of life, we managed to help him and support him. But that's not the case for everybody, because it's everybody's early years experience is completely some of them are really like traumatic, like even more traumatic than traumatic. So it's not always possible, but that's where I sit on it. I can't feel any shame about it anymore, and I don't judge anybody who would come to me and say, look, my kid really does go for it with me, and what can I do? I might not have all the answers for you, but I'd certainly have a few tips, which is maybe another podcast. I mean,
you've made me really think there about, I wonder how many people they're covered in shame because they've not responded well at times.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many people are not putting their head above the parapet because I think, 80% of the time I'm okay. But there was that one time where I reacted.
Yeah.
Or I did X, I did Y.
Absolutely.
And that's really complicated. And I think that's where children's services really, I think that becomes really murky, doesn't it? Because I think I can tell a story about someone. I know someone who they were protecting their 8-year-old from their 11-year-old who was dysregulating. And they put their arm up as they retreated into a bathroom, they put their arm up to stop them, and they had lots of bangles, and the bangles kind of scratched the arm of the child who was kind of aggressive. The child went to school the next day, and there were a few scratch marks, but nothing, like those hairline scratches, How do you do that? Oh, well, Mum did it. A version of events that doesn't reflect what actually happened.
Yeah.
Should she have done it? Maybe it was totally fine. Maybe it wasn't. Who knows? And oftentimes, I think I look back now and I go, I've lost all sense of what really went on.
Yeah,
because everyone was shouting.
Yeah. Exactly. And, sometimes people are pushed to that point as well,
Yeah.
I know I've done it myself. I've closed the door and held the handle to protect myself, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And is that right? Is that great parenting? I don't think it is. No. Well, he wanted to run out the front door. Should I just have let him? I don't know. I can't answer that anymore.
But then it's the next day, isn't it, when you unravel that and you go, should I, and sometimes talking to people, they say, look, I stood in the doorway and I wouldn't let them out. And they came at me and I wouldn't let them out because it was a main road, or it was X, it was the middle of the night, and it was vulnerable. And you kind of go, people are making incredibly complicated decisions in moments of high stress, and people get it wrong.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it's only wrong with 2020 vision. And, I'm not excusing anyone harming a child maliciously or purposefully or out of, but actually I think such high stakes environments for lots of people. Oh, we've gone to a dark place, haven't we?
Ooh, well, I was going to go there from the beginning, to be honest.
Yeah. Sooner or later, we get to the end. So, I'm more than happy to chat to anyone who wants to get in touch with us. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, should we run a support group for men? But I'm not sure anyone would come.
Well, I wouldn't. I'm joking.
Yeah, we'll put it on, but none of us will turn up. It'll just be a blank screen.
That's a little black boxes.
Yeah, we can all tell our partners that we went to it and it was good.
Actually, wow, yeah, I know. But like, just going back, I would be very interested to hear if anybody's experience is different or the same. Even I don't mind.
Yeah.
Actually, it's really good to be able to share those. Not the name and the circumstance, but certainly if there's people who are feeling the same, I think it's always great to share them because
and we can read them out in the next podcast.
Other people will go through it. So
yeah. I mean, I would love to. I mean, if I was a rich man and I had a PhD in me, this probably would be my PhD. Because I think as well that, I mean, maybe another point is the terms of the impact upon our relationships with our spouses, partners. I think that you've pulled a face there. Too soon.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm sure you won't mind me saying that there's a couple of times Tris has packed a bag and gone away for a couple of days with the threat of not coming back.
And I mean, and I think that tension can be around parenting style as well, can't it? Because I think it is again a gross stereotype, but I'm going to lean into it. Is that if mums are more nurturing and dads are more disciplinarian, then that can be a fracture that's like, you're too soft on that kid. I know they experienced trauma. That was 15 bleeding years ago. And mum going, you're too hard on that kid. He's just dysregulated. You're dysregulated. So he becomes
this could be
harder.
Personal experience again now.
Yeah, just hypothetically, someone told me, and I think
true.
that it is
absolutely true. Yeah,
and that causes a fission, or even and I heard this said, and I don't know whether you remember. What was her name? Honor Rhodes from, which is one of the first podcasts. It's still my favorite guest. I must get back in touch with her. And she talked about how, and they were doing stuff at the Tavistock, which is kind of counselling about relationships and adoptive parents' relationships and relationship counselling for adoptive parents. And she said that often when the crap hits the fan, you get this really clear division. You get the person who wanted to adopt and the person who went along with it.
Oh, okay.
Said, and that's not that isn't apparent until it hits the fan.
Yeah.
And we know that the people who, when it does hit the fan, that couples break up.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely couples I know that have.
Yeah. Fiona Wells was on a few weeks ago. That was her story. She talked about the impact of caring for complicated children.
Absolutely.
Relationships. On that bombshell. No, dark note, wasn't it? Blooming heck, that's a bit grim. Anyway, shall we call that quits then? Because I feel like we've unpacked a lot of stuff there.
I think we've done well tonight.
Yeah.
Do you think anybody would criticise us for not,
Well, I don't know. I mean, there might be people who are listening to that and thinking to themselves, well, those are just two male chauvinist pigs. They've leaned into stereotypes and they've painted a
heterosexual chauvinist pig and a gay chauvinist pig.
Well, yeah.
I hope not.
Well, no, I think we've made caveats to everything we've said.
Yeah, of course we do. We always do so, don't we? We always try and cover our backsides. But the other thing I was just going to say before we ended was I would also be really interested to speak to, and it might be something that we think about, is speaking to a same-sex female couple as well to see the dynamics within that as well with the CPV, because I don't know if it would be a similar situation to myself and Tris where one's more nurturing, one's more, like you say, disciplinarian sounds wrong because it makes it look like they've got their hand out and they're smacking a child. That's not what, that's definitely not the words that I would use. But, that kind of So is that the same and all that sort of stuff? So yeah.
Yeah, or do you get too nurturing people, or do you get too? Yeah, I'm not privy to any within no same sex and heterosexual couples. You get all kinds of different personality characters and things.
Well, I mean, you thought we had a cleaner and a cook and a housekeeper and nannies and stuff, didn't you, when you first met us?
Yeah, I totally leaned into that stereotype.
Oh dear, yeah,
absolutely.
Chance to be a thing.
On a final note, maybe a few weeks' time, where I think after you come back from your long weekend away, what's it, 10 days? Is it? Something like that?
7. It's 7 days.
7 days? Oh,
8? Oh, might be 8.
Yeah, see.
9. Wait a minute. 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, it is 9, actually. Wait a minute.
The case for prosecution rests.
We go on the 9th. We go on the evening of the 9th. So 10, 11,
I'm not
12,
that interested.
13, 14, 15, 16. No, it is only 7. It is 7, yeah.
All right. Well, on the 15th of June, we're talking to Sarah Brown from the Adoption Law Centre, aren't we?
We are.
And we're going to do that as a webcast, and we'll trail that. But people might want to ask questions, because I think that's really interesting in terms of kind of getting adoption support put in place, but also in terms of, challenging behaviour, getting support.
Absolutely.
Cool. Is there anything else? Any more parish notices we need to maybe look at?
No, not really, apart from my door's banged all the way through this, but it's too warm to have it open. So if you hear banging in the background.
Bitter here in London, but the clocks have not been ringing, have they?
Bitter.
So that's been good.
What, you're cold?
I was a bit nippy before we started.
What temperature has been there today then?
It was 14. It was 12. It was 12 when I left Newcastle.
No. We've had 27 degrees here on the west coast of Ireland.
Mouth.
Yes.
Gosh.
I've been cleaning the house all day because we've got our Austrian students come tomorrow. The sweat was literally down the crack of my beep. There's a mental image for you.
You told us that. No. I've literally burned my eyes out at the very thought of it.
Yes, 27 today. Has been all week.
Well,
Fabulous.
there you go. That is just you jammy dodger. You get the rain though, don't you? So, it's the
we do.
The
grass is still green, so, I'm not going to complain.
Well, Scott, I hope you have a great holiday. And we'll see you on the 15th. And
16th.
Yeah. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Bon Jovi.
Oh, I intend to do loads that you wouldn't do.
Yeah.
Anchovy, mate.
Stupid boy. Do you think we were manly enough? We should do it. Should we do the introduction? Right, try the introduction. Do it in the most manly voices we can. You start. Go and do it. Go Barry White.
I'm going to be channeling my inner Danny Dyer here. You know that, Jim. Welcome.
Butch Scott. Welcome.
Yeah. Hey, welcome to the 166th. It doesn't suit me, does it?
Doesn't suit,
I think it's the accent as well, to be fair.
Yeah. Anyway, stick to your day job.
I shall. Don't worry. I can't get any worse than that.
I'll say. Anyway, have a good time.
I shall. Tatty bye.